Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Library Facilities Financing Authority Board meeting. The Library Joint Powers Authority Board meeting will run back to back right after this meeting. As an attendee, your microphone is muted for the entire presentation. We are not taking open mic comments. You do not need a microphone, camera, or a screen if you only want to listen to the meeting, as this meeting is accessible by landline or mobile phone. If you need assistance, please call the library's telephone information line at 1-831-427-7713. To join this webinar using a telephone only, dial any of the following numbers, and I'll read two of them aloud. 1-888-788-0099 or 1-833-548-0282. And then slowly enter the webinar ID of 920-8652-0613. The board will take public comments as outlined in the posted agenda and in the next slides. All comments must include the agenda item number in front of the comment and be received prior to the close of public comment on that agenda item. If you are joining by computer, you may use the Q&A feature to type your comments. On the attendee control bar, you'll see the Q&A icon. In the lower left corner, you'll see audio settings, then the Q&A icon, and then in the lower right corner, leave meeting in red letters. If you're using a mobile device, the Q&A icon may appear near the top of your screen. In the upper left corner, you'll see leave meeting in red letters. You'll see the Q&A icon over on the right-hand side. Alternatively, you may call the library's telephone information line to timely submit your comments at 831-427-7713. These will be read by the moderator. Once the board meeting begins, if you're joining by computer, to see all panelists, you may need to use the Zoom control bar and select Gallery View. Depending on the size of your mobile device screen, you may need to scroll over to view whomever is speaking. If you're accessing this meeting via the web browser only, you will not see all panelists at one time, only the panelists speaking. Vice Chair Martine Bernal will now call the meeting to order. Please stand by.
Thank you. I'd like to call to order the Thursday, August 6th meeting of the Santa Cruz Libraries Facilities Financing Authority, regular board meeting. May we have a roll call, please?
Director Tina Friend.
Here.
Director Carlos Palacios.
Here.
Director Steve Jasberg, alternate for Jamie Goldstein.
Here.
Vice Chair Martine Bernal.
Here. All right, thank you very much. We'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is additional materials. Are there any additional materials for the agenda today?
There are not.
Okay, thank you. Next is additions and deletions to the agenda. I'm not aware of any. Just checking.
There are not.
Okay, thank you. The fourth item on the agenda is oral communications. This is an opportunity for any member of the public to provide comments to the library board on items that are not on the agenda but are subject matter of the financing authority. Is there anyone from the public that would like to comment on oral communications?
Vice Chair Bernal, there are no comments at this time.
Great. Thank you very much. Next is the Executive Director report.
I have submitted my report to you in writing. There are several things that are happening in relationship to the facilities projects that are quite exciting. I would like to note that the Aptos Library has been bid out as our first design build project. Anderson Brule and Bogart, the team of Anderson Brule and Bogart, have been selected and approved by the county board. So we're really excited to move forward with that project. The Boulder Creek RFP has gone out, and people have bid upon it, and we believe that we'll be able to begin the Boulder Creek construction project this fall. So we're really, really excited about those two things. When we get to the JPA meeting, one of the things you're going to see is the Friends of the Library are bringing some rather large gifts to our building projects. And I just want to acknowledge that the Friends have been remarkably successful in their capital campaigns and bringing significant improvements to our physical facilities through their gifts. That's all.
No? Okay. Are there any members of the public that like to comment on this item?
Vice Chair Burnell,
Yes?
I do not believe there are any comments at this time.
Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Now we have item 6 on the agenda, which is project updates and comments by board members. The board members that like to provide updates this time.
Vice Chair Bernal, I have just a quick update. I just want to comment. Thank you, Susan, for including the picture of our refurbished teen area booths at the Scotts Valley branch in your report. And I know while it might seem like a small improvement, it's actually hugely emblematic because it's showing that we are, after years literally of planning and figuring out what we want to do, we're swiftly moving into a construction phase. So that's very exciting for us. So that was just one small piece, but again, it just was really getting over a mountain. And also pleased to report that at last night's city council meeting, my council approved a contract to replace the roof as well as to contract with Group 4. So we're very excited this fall to move into the structural upgrades for the seismic integrity of the building, replace the roof, replace the HVAC, and some other structural elements with the building, and then move into the very fun planning of design and interior and some exterior aesthetic improvements. So I just want to express that and my thanks to Edith and to Susan for their help through the whole bond process and just how excited we are to see improvements at Scotts Valley. Thank you. Exactly.
All right, thank you. Anyone else to comment? Really briefly too, in the city of Santa Cruz, we did, maybe Susan reported on this already, but the city council did approve to move forward with the mixed use project. And so that's kicking off with getting the plans in place to try to make that happen. And that would include housing, I think 50 units of housing, parking structure, and the new library building as well. All right, thank you very much. Are there any members of the public that have any comments on item 6?
Vice Chair Burnell, there are no public comments at this time.
Okay, thank you. Next we have consent calendar. Are there any item on the consent calendar that members of the board would like to pull? Items A through D? No? All right. Are there any members of the public that would like to comment or pull an item from the consent calendar?
Vice Chair Burnell, there are no comments on this item.
All right, thank you very much. In that case, could take a motion to approve the consent calendar.
Yeah, I'll move approval of the consent calendar, items A through D.
I'll second that.
All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. So that passes unanimously. Okay, thank you. Now we're on to general business, which it says there's none. So I guess that's good. And then after that, we've got scheduled upcoming meetings. The next meeting is October 1st at 6 p.m. And finally, item 10 is adjournment. Okay, so we'd like to adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much. All right, well, we'll next go to calling to order the Thursday, August 6th, 2020 meeting of the Santa Cruz City County Library's Joint Powers Authority Board regular meeting. May I have a roll call, please?
Director Tina Friend,
Here.
Director Carlos Palacios,
Here.
Director Steve Jasberg, alternate for Jamie Goldstein,
Here.
Vice Chair Martin Bernal.
Here. Thank you. Next item is additional materials. Are there any additional materials?
There are not any additional materials.
Okay, thank you very much. Any additions and deletions to the agenda?
There are not any additions or deletions to the agenda.
Thank you. Next is item 4, which is oral communications, an opportunity for members of the public to address the board on items that are not on the agenda but are the subject matter of the library board. Are there any members of the public that like to comment?
Vice Chair Bernal, there are no public comments at this time.
Thank you. Next is item 5, which is a report by the library director.
Basically, we just have outlined in writing the services that we have been providing through this COVID period. You know, we continue curbside pickup at 5 sites, continue virtual programming, which has proven to be quite popular. We have an online info telereference program. We are getting about 3 times the calls that we normally do. And so the services that we have been providing have been quite successful. Eric, are there any additional things that you would like to talk about in terms of what we're currently providing?
Well, we're still wrapping up summer reading. We've extended that, and we've had a good engagement with the public on that. And we continue to run really robust virtual programming.
Thank you. Martine?
Yes?
You're muted.
Oh, okay. All right. Anything else, Susan?
No, not at this time.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from board members for Susan? Don't see any. Okay, any members of the public would like to comment on this item?
Vice Chair Bernal, there are no public comments on this item.
Okay, thank you. And there's no action. So we'll move on to the next item, which is a report by Friends of the Santa Cruz Public Libraries. I think we have Martine here.
Yes.
Oh.
Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
I don't know if you need my camera on or not. Is that how this, let's see. I was having trouble with my camera yesterday. There I am. Good morning. So thank you. Just want to give you a couple of brief updates. First off, I want to let you know that there's been a leadership change of Friends of the Library. Unfortunately, our ED, our executive director, who we met once previously, has left, gone back to her previous position at another nonprofit here in Santa Cruz. As a result, I have agreed to step down from the board and take on a interim basis the role of the executive director. And in that process, for the next 6 months, I will be helping to reorganize our capital campaign and our fundraising work. Some of you may know that one of the jobs I did previously was to run the Friends and Foundation of the San Francisco Public Library. So I have some experience in that area. I've been on the job now since early July and spending some time in the office, but mostly working from home with the board and other activities. I want to let you know that we've also, as part of our regular changing of the guard, we have new board member, a woman by the name of Gail Levine, who is the retired supervisor or superintendent of schools for the Bonnie Doon School District. We're happy to welcome Gail. We didn't have much representation from that area in the county. And also, many of you know Cindy Jackson, who is the president of the La Selva chapter. She is now the new president for the Friends of the Santa Cruz Public Libraries. As part of the work that we've done, and you'll be hearing Susan maybe perhaps comment on this, but we approved the transfer of $75,000 to the Boulder Creek project. Our focus on the fundraising for that has been very successful, as Susan mentioned. And we also approved an additional payment for the La Selva Beach modification. there for another $95,000 that's been paid out to Jason Architects. We're very pleased with the work we've been doing. We've been successful, as Susan mentioned, but we can still do a lot more. There's more projects in the pipeline, and we're trying to get ourselves queued up for that so that we can successfully not only raise money for those projects, but we have a challenge grant, as many of you know, from the Monterey Peninsula Foundation. We've raised most of the money. The grant is a $300,000 grant, so if we bring in 300, they'll give us another 300. We did get the first payment on that went to the city, of course, and then the second part, where our goal was to reach the second $150,000, or excuse me, yeah, 150, which we've already done, but we need to raise more by February 1st of 2021. So that basically is the summary of my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Okay.
And I just want to add, I was really sad to see Marcia go. She's a talented professional. But sometimes the universe, when things are really down, sends you a gift. And I am so grateful for the experience and leadership of Martin Gomez and his willingness to take us on during this really difficult period under COVID. And I'm just really glad to have him on board and so grateful for that leadership.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was going to say too, we're very lucky to have you, Martine, with your background and experience, and appreciate all the work that you've done. It sounds like you've done, the board has done, and the organization's done a lot of work, particularly the fundraising. That's amazing. Are there any questions for Martine from members of the board? No questions? Anything else, Martine, that you'd like to add?
No, thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. All right, are there any members of the public who'd like to comment on this item?
Vice Chair Bernal, we do not have public comments on this item, but I'm sorry, I neglected to read the items for number 5. So after this, if we could go back to agenda item number 5, I do have 2 public comments. I'm sorry, I got mixed up.
All right, no problem, thank you. All right, we'll go back then to item 5, which is a report by the library director, and there's some public comments, so go ahead.
Right, the first one is from Bob Morgan. It says, "Good morning, my name is Bob Morgan. I'm on the executive committee of Sierra Club Santa Cruz Group, and I chair the Transportation Committee. I'd like to comment on item 5, the media packet in the director's report. Specifically, the letter from the Chamber of Commerce is a faulty interpretation of the Sierra Club's national policies on infill and transportation, misrepresenting these policies as rationale for the mixed-use building on Lot 4. There are numerous instances in the letter that conflate and confuse Sierra Club policy with construction of this edifice. Most glaringly, the letter cites, quote, transit, bike, and pedestrian first approaches to transportation, end quote, as evidence that SC policies defend this project, end quote. And while we agree that good planning includes density and affordable housing, as the Chamber's letter states, we're not convinced that this Lot 4 project is necessary to achieve that goal. We support direct investment in housing on city lots other than Lot 4. End comment. And then we have another comment. So this one includes some photos. So I'm going to share my screen. And here's the first photo. And then I'll read the comment and then display the second photo. So this comes from Judy Gunstra, agenda item number 5. I was quite appalled to read the library director's statement on page 14, both in print and in televised news coverage, that the old structure would need a complete teardown. That is definitely not what the Jason proposal involves. As I'm sure the JPA knows, the 1-story sections would be removed, but the remaining 2-story building footprint would remain, with new interior, new HVAC, realigned entry, etc., etc. Why is the director providing false information to the public? Most people will accept her at her word. This is outright deception. This month's media packet is particularly poorly organized, with letters to the editor and op-ed pieces interspersed with listings of library activities in a big mishmash. Presenting information in an organized fashion is one of the essential functions of libraries. Additionally, citations are missed for many of these media releases. A piece by Jacob Pierce, page 29, doesn't identify where his piece was published, merely, quote, posted on June 22nd, 2020, end quote, Posted where? Some letters to the editor are not attributed to the source in which they appeared. We see a logo for what looks like, quote, TPG Online Daily, end quote, page 41. But what is TPG Daily? Worst of all is the inclusion of 2 pieces by the Chamber of Commerce, pages 37 through 41, which include derogatory statements about a city council member. Since when does the JPA packet include internal communications meant for Chamber of Commerce members rather than the general public? I guess
And then just the one thing I want to clarify is actually these comments are in reference to the letter A on the consent calendar, or sorry, letter B, which they reference recent articles about the Santa Cruz Public Library, just as a point of clarification.
And then here's the second photo.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? Double checking.
Let's see, and then Judy Genstra does continue that. She says, my email concerned this misstatement by the library director on the KSBW news report that the Jason project would be a complete teardown. I also commented on the inappropriateness of including the Chamber of Commerce in-house newsletter in the media packet, which included derogatory comments about a city member, as well as misrepresenting the Sierra Club stand on the mixed-use project. I believe that's the end of the comment.
Okay, thank you. All right, this is not an action item, so we'll continue then. We already did item number 6. We'll move on to item number 7, which is a report by the Library Advisory Commission. Do we have a report?
And we have Bob White here.
Okay, welcome, Bob. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Bob White. I'm chair of the Library Advisory Commission, and I have a brief report to make. The commission met on Monday, July 20th via Zoom teleconference. At its meeting, the commission reviewed several items, and I would just like to briefly review those 2 items for you. The first item discussed was the library operational recommendations under COVID-19. The commission reviewed and discussed these recommendations, and the recommendations address a number of library service areas. And these include the following: expanding access to the internet, boosting Wi-Fi signals from designated buildings, expanding access to computer hardware, expanding access to printing, and expanding access to technology support. These recommendations will help address the information needs of our community and those who are underserved and who do not have access to a computer, the internet, or Wi-Fi. There is a digital divide in our community, and these recommendations will help narrow that divide. The Library Advisory Commission unanimously and I might say enthusiastically supports these recommendations and service initiatives. Library Director Nimitz, Assistant Director Howard, and the entire library staff are to be commended and thanked for extending innovative library services to our community during this difficult time period. The second item discussed was the review of library facilities. And Susan's already briefly touched on some of those. The review briefly describes and highlights the new library buildings that have been completed or are under construction, and library facilities that will be constructed or remodeled and refurbished. It's a very impressive list. It's one in which we can all be proud, and it reflects, I think, a tremendous amount of energy and work that's being done to bring our library buildings and facilities into the 21st century. That concludes my report. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Mr. White? Doesn't look like it. Thank you very much for your service and for the report. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Are there any members of the public that would like to comment on this item this time?
Vice Chair Bernal, there are no public comments at this time on the Friends report.
Okay, thank you. Let's see. So next item then, this is no action. Next item is comments by board members. Are there any comments by board members?
Vice Chair Bernal, I do have a brief one.
Please proceed.
Thank you. So I just wanted to express my appreciation to the library staff for just incredible resilience in these difficult times. And just to relate just an experience I had with curbside pickup. I know that many library patrons have been using this service. I did it just for the first time a couple of weeks ago, so I know I'm behind the curve on this. And it was just a marvelous experience. From the online reservation, and I picked up my books at the Aptos branch. I was able to see the branch manager there, as well as James from downtown. Everyone was smiling. There was a nice little socially distanced line of people queuing up, and it was just wonderful to have that sense of going somewhere, getting this resource. It was so organized in your paper bag. And then even as I were leaving, I got a little bag of chalk for my son. I have a 5-year-old who's a big reader, and we're starting the Harry Potter series, which is very exciting for me. I'm waiting to reread the series. And I just really want to thank people. I know it's been extra effort, and I think this was outlined in your update, Susan, that it's taking a lot of staff time and power to do the browsing, select the books. But I have to say, the joy I felt with myself and my family and what I saw with others, just thank you so much for making this happen. It sounds like we're also one of the first ones to do this. And so we're really leading the charge on, even though we're in these difficult times, how do we continue the service? So I just want to extend appreciation to everyone at the library. Thank you. And I'll be back this afternoon to get my second pickup. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Member Friend. Are there any other comments by board members? All right, thank you very much. Yes, and I think particularly now with the situation with the schools in particular, I think the libraries really play a really vital role in trying to help particularly parents who have kids and need that additional programming and assistance. So yeah, thanks again. The staff does a really awesome job, that's for sure. Let's move on to the next item, which is the consent calendar. And let's see, we've got items A through K. Are there any items on the consent calendar that board members would like to pull or comment on? Not hearing any. Are there any members of the public that would like to pull or comment on consent items?
Vice Chair Bernal, I do not see any public comments on the consent calendar.
Okay. With that, may I have a motion to approve the consent calendar?
I'll move approval of the consent calendar items A through K.
Second.
All right. Motion. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, so that passes unanimously. Thank you very much. We'll now move on to the next item, which is general business. First item, item A, is a presentation from Heather Nordquist on how the library is supporting children, families, and schools during COVID-19.
And I just want to say, we did a survey of staff in June, as well as spent some time talking with the Library Advisory Commission about what our priorities should be in a time where we have limited resources. And I think unanimously, the two places that these groups asked us to work on were the digital divide and technology issues. But the other one was really supporting school teachers and families who are trying to do distance learning. So Heather really leads a group of library staff who are really trying to look at how we can support families and educators during this really difficult time. Heather, thank you for coming and talking to us.
about are ones that I've worked with on the K through 12 outreach team and the emerging youth programs team and the summer reading team. But everyone who works for the library has been involved in one way or another, and it's been really rewarding work since COVID started and during the summer. Right away, as soon as schools closed, we realized that teachers needed support getting books to their students, providing resources. And so we set up a digital concierge service. We publicized this to teachers through the teacher newsletter and on our teacher page of the website, that teachers could contact us, our K through 12 librarians, and get lists of ebooks that they could access through the library, since they couldn't access our physical collections. So we would provide bibliographies of ebooks they could check out, or class sets of ebooks, so that they could continue accessing books. And that they communicated to us that that was their most urgent need right away. So we also increased publication of our teacher newsletter to weekly, so that we could keep teachers informed of new services as we added them in response to the COVID crisis. We created a group of PowerPoints that are virtual class visits. Teachers usually at the end of the school year and the beginning of the school year bring their classes for an introduction to the library, and everyone gets a library card. We couldn't do that when the libraries were closed. So we've been working on grade appropriate PowerPoints that we will be adding to the teacher page soon, so that they can get the same experience and learn to use the virtual library. We offered online parenting programs, webinars offered by the Parents Place, designed to help families cope with the coronavirus crisis. They were on a range of topics for different age groups. Some examples are balancing the responsibilities of parenting and teaching your kids during a global crisis. And another one is letting go and staying calm and centered during uncertain times. Those were very well attended, and we hope to offer similar ones in the future. We had to transition to virtual story times, and that took some quick learning. But after a couple of weeks, we were able to offer Zoom toddler time, preschool story time, Cuéntame un cuento. Those are live interactive story times, very popular. And we also offer recorded story times that can be accessed at any time. And those include stories for bedtime, tell me a story, preschool story time, music and movement, Cuéntame un cuento, and some Kids Create STEAM programs, and also a STEAM program in Spanish, Cuentos y Experimentos, that are available on Facebook and YouTube. We also offered something fun, an online Lego challenge, a weekly challenge where kids were given, you can only use 25 Lego bricks, and you need to come up with, for example, a farm animal. And that was something that was enjoyed by families, parents, and kids, and wide participation. I've heard that we had a lot of participants from Palo Alto and even from Taiwan, I think. So very popular. We also, responding to the needs of teachers, because all of a sudden everyone needed to access ebooks, we needed to issue e-cards to all of the students. And so we needed to make that process of issuing library cards easier. So we created some videos in Spanish and English that we shared with teachers, and they're now on the website, that guide people through the process of applying for a library card online. And once they do that, and they can immediately access all of our ebooks and e-resources. And then once we were let's see, then once we were open again for curbside and also before, some teachers realized that their kids also needed physical cards. So one school that we provided cards to every student, a physical card to every student, was Galt Elementary. We provided 300 physical cards to the students at Galt Elementary, which was a time-consuming process. And as part of that, we realized, and I think the schools realized, that we do need to work towards a system where we can use data sharing from the schools to issue library cards in a much more easier way, rather than having 300 paper applications that we enter by hand. If we can do the data transfer, it'll be much easier. So we're working toward that. That's one silver lining. It allowed us to revisit that discussion. And that led to an agreement with Santa Cruz City Schools District that we are going to implement the Sora app, which is a way that students in that district will be able to access our Overdrive collections of ebooks using their student ID number, using the app. So they'll be using our resources, using their student ID to access just curated collections at their grade level. And it just makes it easy for them, easy for us. But as part of that agreement, this is what we're doing for them. We're making access to Overdrive easier. And what they're doing for us is pursuing the MOU agreement where they will share data and we can issue library cards that way. So it's a good compromise, and we're really looking forward to that. We made some, and we're starting that pilot with Santa Cruz City Schools, and I'm sure it will be successful and other districts will also want to follow. We made some changes to the website right away. We added COVID-19 resources for children to the kids page. We added some fun things, and also some to the teen page. We added a place where they could add their 6-word memoirs, or they could share what they're doing during when they were sheltering in place, how they were spending the time. So we added both fun and emotional support resources. We also added lots of links to just general helpful resources to the kids and the teen pages. We've been promoting Brain Views, which is an online tutoring service that is very helpful for kids. And since they're doing remote learning, we're really going to promote it in the coming school years. Brain Views provides one-on-one tutoring. They have tutors in Spanish. They do a really good job, and they also have just added a new service adding FAFSA help for financial aid applications. So we're going to be promoting that as the school year begins. We've been providing it for years, but now it's especially useful. And we're also working on expanding our telephone support to students, to kids and students. We're expanding the service, and we're going to be providing K through 12 librarians who can work with students on their projects over the phone. And then, of course, we did summer reading. I have some numbers for you. We had 935 youth, that includes kids and teens, 255 adults participating through Beanstack. That's the online app. But we also had participants who did not sign up through the online app. So that's a separate number that they participated using logs. And so I'll get into that later. But we distributed 276 incentive books and another 602 at the summer lunch sites. And those incentive books were purchased with the help of friends. So I wanted to thank the library friends for their contribution of funds for the incentive books. We also, like Tina mentioned, distributed sidewalk chalk, colored paper, crayons, stickers at curbside, just to add, you know, to brighten up kids' days during the summer when they came to pick up books, because they had, in some ways, their summer was a little bit crummy. Our summer reading program, we offered some great performers, and the performances were really well attended. We had bubble magic magicians, we had music and stories. Our last performer was Tom Naughty, and we had 369 attendees for bubble magic. And thank you also to the Friends for supporting those performers. We've extended the summer reading program through August 15th. We feel like the summer was so strange and so many, you know, different things coming up that we thought it was a good idea to give people the chance to finish up. And Joe at Atlantis Fantasy World, who's a major sponsor, has agreed to continue giving, accepting his coupons for a free book through Labor Day. And then finally, we did some great work at summer lunch sites. We received a grant from the State Library to provide pop-up grab-and-go programs at 8 summer lunch sites throughout the county. We connected with 1,454 visits. We visited each site 3 times during the summer. So we had 24 distributions where we were distributing craft kits or books. So we distributed a total of 1,400 craft kits and books. The craft kits had things like paper, crayons, markers, scissors, tape, chalk, things that families probably couldn't afford or wouldn't think of buying or having at home. And then they also had instructions on how they could use things that they did have at home, like, you know, paper towel rolls or whatever, to make different craft projects. All of the families at these sites received information about the summer reading program and performers, and also census information. So we tied that in. What else? Everyone was invited to take part in summer reading, and they received book prizes for reading at least 5 hours. And like I said, we distributed, I think, over 600 incentive books at those summer lunch sites. So everyone who worked on that, there were a lot of staff involved at those lunch sites. It was an amazing experience. There would be like 100 people coming to a site, 100 cars, you know, going through really quickly, and they just had to quickly communicate. We have summer reading. Here's your craft kit. Enjoy. This is what you can do, and then they would zoom by. And then the same thing when they were delivering the incentive books at the end, they just had to say, how many kids do you have? What grades are they? And then just give the book through the window. But it was really rewarding. The participants really appreciated and let us know. And we were able to communicate information about the library that many families weren't aware of, that we were doing curbside and all of our programs. And we're going to continue this partnership during the school year. So thank you for listening. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
All right, are there any questions for Heather?
I have a comment and some. So thank you, Heather. That was a great presentation, and thank you and congratulations to you and all of the staff for the really innovative and creative ways you've dealt with the crisis and still done a lot of outreach and partnership with our schools and our families. So thank you. It's wonderful. I would also like to bring up another issue, which I will talk more about on item C, which is the operational. And that is that I do think that we need to start moving towards reopening our libraries on a limited basis. We have an equity lens that we are operating under at the County of Santa Cruz. And the problem is that there's a significant part of our population that does not have access to Wi-Fi or electronic devices, or has very limited access to them. And so much of our services are geared toward those that this divide that's happening, and the schools are having a huge divide. You can imagine all the online learning and these families that don't have Wi-Fi or have very spotty Wi-Fi or overcrowded housing, and they're falling behind. And then if an important service like our libraries are also not open, but in fact are relying mainly on Wi-Fi and online services, although I think that the curbside and other outreach you've done is great. But I do think we need to start moving towards reopening our libraries. I know that safety is an issue, but it can be dealt with. And in fact, we have childcare that's open, and it's been safely done. We have our recreation programs that are open, that's been safely done. We have our swim center that's open. We have every service, in fact, in the county is open. You can get married, you can get birth certificates, you can come in and meet on a planning item. Again, it has to be done thoughtfully and carefully, but there is a way to do it. And what that means is that then those folks who are primarily low income, and many of them people of color, would have more access to Wi-Fi, our computers, and to our services. And so anyway, I think what we've done is incredible. And what I hope, and this is mainly towards Susan, is how in the future, I know other libraries are not opening, but there is a way to do it safely. And my point of view is that we've opened up so many other services on a limited basis. We're having recreation programs, for example, on a limited basis, and other county services. But it's such a critical issue, in that our one group of our community is falling behind because of the school issue. And if we can safely start opening on a limited basis and outreach to these kids who are in school and homeschooling and so forth, I think it would be a good thing. So anyway, that's my hope, and I know that we will talk more about it on item C today, but I think it's very related to this item, because in my mind, it's in looking at an equity lens of how we're dealing with this pandemic. I think that we have to especially focus on the young people, the kids who are in schools and who are falling behind and who are going to fall behind. The schools are doing everything they can to do homeschooling, and I understand it. From running a school, an elementary school with 600 kids or 500 kids is very impossible probably right now, and in fact it's not allowed. But libraries are considered, as the rest of government, an essential service, and if we can have Trader Joe's open, I think we could have our library open. And if we can have Walgreens open, I think we can have our library open. And if we can have our recorder and our elections and our swim center and our recreation centers open, I think we can have the libraries open. It'll have to be done on a very limited basis and be very careful. But I think this item, the schools item, is especially critical, because we have to help these kids who are going to fall behind. There is going to be a huge divide after, this is going to go on for another year. Remember, this is a year-long thing. And to have a group of our kids falling so far behind, and we can't do anything about the schools, of course, but we can do our part, I think, with the libraries. Thank you.
And I would like to have more conversation about this, but I would like to go through the work plan item before we talk more, if that's okay.
Yeah, we can do that. And okay, all right. Thank you. Any other comments from board members on this item? And then yes, we'll have a conversation about.
Vice Chair Bernal, I have a couple.
Yes, please.
Comment. First, thank you, Heather, for that expansive report. To echo what Carlos said, it's just incredible not only how you've adapted our existing programming, but also thought about new ways. And yet perhaps we can go further. I think that's a really good conversation we can have, but I do want to appreciate all that you're offering. And when you're going through it, I was getting a bit overwhelmed. I guess there's just so many programs and things. So I just want to take a moment to express, where do people find all these resources? I pulled up the library's website, santacruzpl.org, and you have a button here along the top menu that says kids. And it seems like that is the place where community members can go to find all of the programming and online resources and live toddler time readings. Is that correct, Heather? Is that the place for it all? Okay. So that's the one place, because there are just so many different options. I'm like, there's a lot to explore here, including the fish cam, which we have visited as well as a family to see the aquarium at the downtown branch. And then second, this is a question about the instructional support. And this goes to a point that Member Palacios was making as well, about we're moving into this time where we have children that have more needs than ever, because we won't have schools opening, or perhaps not even open for the entire first semester. I don't know the latest with all the districts in the county where that is, but I know that at least some of them won't even open until January. So now either parents are going to have to manage and monitor their children's education for months at a time, or which they need help for. So it sounds like you have resources for teachers, but also thinking what's also the pathway to parents, because they're going to be juggling a lot. And then also, and this is maybe more pertinent to the jurisdictions on this meeting, is that we're all looking to provide childcare in the limited fashion that we can provide it, very small groups, all of the safety precautions. But up here at Scotts Valley, we're scrambling to figure out, this is a really different model for us. And normally we've provided before school care and after school care, and it's been very recreation based. But we're envisioning, and I know the other jurisdictions are as well, full day care, 8 or 9 hours, which would include the whatever 2, 3, 4 hours, I'm not sure what it is, of required instruction through their schools. And so we're trying to figure out, how do we provide adequate resources, oversight to make that an enriching experience for them. And because the parents have to go to work, they need their kids cared for, and they also want their children educated. And I know schools will do what they can, but I'm wondering if there are also pathways and support for the cities and the county as we're trying to provide this childcare, which is also being very rich with visual instruction. So is there thought given to that, or are there ways that we can talk about future partnerships there?
Yes, for sure. I think both County Parks and Rec and the City of Santa Cruz Parks and Rec, who I think are sort of managing a lot of the childcare discussions with the school districts, have reached out to the library. So Tina, we would be glad to work with you. It's everything from facilities, resources, visits, programs, and we would be happy to work with Scotts Valley, and I would like to push that out to Capitola as well. I think we're all going to have to work together to provide these services over the next 4 months.
Okay, so it sounds like that conversation is already happening with a couple other jurisdictions, so that's good. Okay, great. So we will definitely love to partner on that. We need your support. We need our librarians to help and reach deeply into this field, and it sounds like everyone's up for the challenge. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I could add also that I think maybe even the jurisdictions can work together on some of this too, because I think as Susan noted, we are over at the city putting together a child care program. I think it's scheduled to run from 7:30 a.m. to 5:30 p.m. And so it's all being put together now, and so the jurisdictions can work together on that. So I'd be happy to work with you. Okay, any other comments on this item? No? Okay, thank you very much. Let's move on to the next item then.
Excuse me, Vice Chair Bernal, we do have public comment on this item.
That's right. Okay, sorry about that. Yes, please. Public comments, please.
All right, the first one comes from Susan Nilsson. It was such an incredible experience. I loved serving the community this way. We handed out mini books in Spanish at Live Oak Elementary. Our next comment comes from Judy Grunstra. Given the concerns about protecting privacy when arranging to share student data with the library to make it easier to issue library cards to GALT students, did parents have to sign an agreement to share that data about their children? And then her next comment, same, Judy Grenscher, is in response to Director Palacios. It is the school's job to provide space for students, more so than the library. Of course, the library is important, but the library is not retail or recreation center. And that ends the public comments.
Okay, thank you. And again, thank you, Heather, for that presentation. We'll move on to the next item, which is item B, which is the budget update on the fiscal year 2021 budget. Susan, I'll turn it over to you for a presentation.
On page 122 is sort of a summary of where we're at. When we passed the budget in June, the board requested that we look at the budget every time that we meet, recognizing that revenue projections could change dramatically. There just hasn't been a lot of time between June and this meeting. I spoke with the county and we're still waiting to see the changes in the revenue forecasts, particularly around the sales tax forecasts. So without that change, we aren't recommending major changes to the library budget at this time, but we expect that we may have to in October at our next board meeting. I do want to say two things. With the preliminary year end, we had estimated an amount we were going to use the reserves. It's likely that we're going to use less than we projected, so that's good news, but I don't think it's going to be material in terms of our overall budget. The second thing is, in the budget process, I had recommended that we approve early retirement packages, and we had 9 people request early retirement. Unfortunately, the city of Santa Cruz requires that in order to accept the retirement package, that position be held open for a year. And so as we started looking at our personnel complement, we had 98 full-time equivalent staff and 62 temporaries. And the 62 temporaries equal about 26 FTE in terms of workload. So we've lost 26 FTE because we're not rehiring our temporaries. We've lost about 10 FTE due to the furloughs, and we've lost about 10 FTE due to hiring freezes. And so I didn't really believe that we could add 9 FTE to our personnel pool at this time, or reduce our personnel pool by an additional 9 FTE, and I rejected all of the retirement packages. The consequence of that, though, is we have to make up that within the budget. I spent some time with Jamie going through how we could do that, and our approach is going to be additional hiring freezes. We had estimated that we would save about $500,000 in hiring freezes and about $300,000 to the retirements. And I believe we can achieve that $800,000 goal just through the hiring freeze. I think we're sort of fiscally in the same place that we were when we created the budget, but I do expect the sales tax revenue projections that are likely to come out at the end of August to require some potential changes in the library's budget as COVID is going on longer than we had anticipated. The one discussion I think I had with Nicole was that it does appear the tax revenue from the hotel tax is coming in slightly above, and but I still think we're going to have to wait till October to see how well we're meeting our revenue forecast. Nicole, is there anything you wanted to add to that?
Well, I would just note the sales tax came in higher in the last fiscal year that we ended because of the strong online sales. But in this current year, it's still hovering around the initial estimate that we gave the library and that HDL gave us. And there's just so much uncertainties that currently with the closures that have been happening and just the status of the pandemic that we didn't want to make any other changes to the sales tax revenues quite yet until we saw what was coming in the first quarter of this year. So we should have much more information, hopefully in October.
And so at this time, I'm not making any recommendations for changes in the budget that we've approved in June.
Okay, thank you, Susan. Are there any questions from board members for Susan on the budget update? Questions? All right, are there any members of the public that like to comment on this item?
Vice Chair Bernal, there are no public comments at this time.
Okay, so I don't believe there's any action required for this item. It's just an update. So we can move on to the next item, which is item C, which is library operational recommendations under COVID-19. I'll turn it over to Susan for a staff presentation or report.
And you'll see that we provided some data over the last year, and I think it goes to the point that Carlos had made earlier, that a lot of people rely heavily on the library for its technology. We did create a plan for reopening, and we've backed off from that plan. And this is our alternative plan at this moment, based upon the discussions with the LAC. But again, Carlos, I think we need to address your concerns. I would like Eric to walk through sort of the next steps of what we plan on doing over the next 2 months. Eric?
Sure, thank you, and good morning, board members. Bob White did a good job actually of outlining the areas that we're going to be tackling. And you know, we are in a perpetual state of transition, as you all know, and we're trying to weigh the guidelines that we're getting from the state, from our national association, and trying to make it work with the unique operations of a library. Oftentimes when people come in to use a computer, for instance, they're there for at least an hour. I know that when you move through a food store, you're usually in and out, and you're not standing in one place for more than usually 10 minutes, which is typically the guidelines that we're getting, is that you shouldn't be having an interaction with someone for more than 10 minutes. Ideally, though, you should be having your mask on and 6 feet apart. But there are some unique needs inside a library that we have that are different, I believe, than other operations. And so we're trying to figure out how to accommodate those needs. One of those that we're considering is going outside. You heard Heather talk about how we're taking the services of the library and we are going beyond the walls of the library to meet those needs. And I think specifically to address the equity issues that we have in our community. And so that's why we chose the school lunch program. And as she said, we're going to continue with that. And she also talked a little bit about how that helps get the word out about the other services that we offer through the library. A lot of individuals don't know that we have all these services that we provide. And in fact, that's what we hear when we talk to the staff who've been doing the school lunch program, is that for a lot of these families, this is the first time that they're hearing about the services that we offer. And that they can call us and access these services. So going beyond our walls is one crucial and important step that we're going to be taking advantage of more and more. And that's kind of the fourth, I'm jumping to the fourth part of this program that we're putting in place, which is how we're going to be connecting with teachers and schools. But in addition to that, we're going to be looking to create the library outside in potentially ways like having an internet cafe outside. We know that that's much safer. You're 20 times more likely or 20 times greater risk if you're indoors. But if you're outdoors and you're spread out, then it's much safer. And we can do that. We can provide charged up laptops and set up internet cafes outside the building outside the building's walls. So that's one piece. We're also going to start lending out Chromebooks. And that will also help with that digital divide. And as Susan mentioned earlier, our tele-info service is up dramatically. We are helping the community support them in how they connect. A lot of those calls are, how do I download an ebook? How do I access the e-library? And so now our staff are trained, and we have a whole module set up so that we can walk patrons through that process. And we're consequently seeing a dramatic jump in the use of our ebooks. because of this new situation. And then beginning in mid-August, we're going to start allowing for individuals to send their print jobs to the library, so they'll be able to pick it up. We're going to pilot that at the downtown library, where we recognize that's the biggest need in the community, and then we'll learn from that experience and expand that out. So that'll become part of the curbside service. So if you need to print out any critical documents, you can do that and then send it to the library and then just pick it up for free. And we started to experiment a little bit with those kind of programs already. We've lent out computers to a number of shelters. We've also worked with partners at the downtown library outside to provide critical documents to individuals so that they can access benefits. So we've been piloting this here and there to try to manage the digital divide. But those are the 4 big pieces that we're going to do initially over the next few months, and then we'll continue to expand and figure out how to do this safely, and then hopefully soon we won't be confronting the restrictions that we have, because these numbers will hopefully go down because of all the precautions that we're all taking. Those are the big pieces. You have in front of you on page 125 the 4 pieces that Bob already outlined, and it's expand the access to the internet, expand access to computer hardware, and expand access to printing. And then the 4th piece, really, it's more than just expand access to technology support. It's building those relationships even stronger with the schools that we've been doing, and trying to meet and trying to figure out specifically where their needs are and what the library can do to assist them. And so,
then I just wanted to respond to one thing, Carlos, that you had said specifically. You know, we keep going back and forth about letting people in the buildings. So we're in a situation where we have competing health orders. It's interesting because libraries are considered essential, but the latest health order by the governor, we're in a category with museums, and there's one other group with us that were specifically told to close inside services in the last week. And so I think we could argue that we can do it. We could also argue that we shouldn't do it. But I think the difference between a lot of office spaces, and I know you gave examples of parks, but is that people tend to linger inside of a library, and it tends to be inside, which is why we had shifted to the strategy of trying to bring the services outside the building. You know, one thing Eric didn't talk about, but we put on the 5 libraries we're doing curbside, we also have extended our Wi-Fi all around the parking lots. Our goal is to get the bookmobile out as a Wi-Fi hotspot in communities that, you know, maybe like going to Davenport and some of the communities that are more distant, and to really begin to advertise that if you want free Wi-Fi, you can come and use it in our library parking lots. So I went Saturday night, maybe a week ago Saturday night, to Felton, and it was probably 7 p.m. and there were 5 cars there with people using our Wi-Fi services. So we want to really publicize that there's free Wi-Fi. I did try to talk to some of the folks that were there, and these were folks that lived in the mountains and didn't just have good access to Wi-Fi in the community. But I know that we get heavy use off the Aptos branch, and less so at Scotts Valley and Live Oak. And there are some issues always with neighbors and camping, but I think really this is a time to begin to promote that this costs the library nothing to keep the Wi-Fi on. And it was just like a small investment of $500 to send the service over the parking lots. With that, do you have questions, concerns, ideas?
So thank you. Yeah, I think those are great, Eric. Those are all great ideas. And I think the idea of especially going outside and maybe buying some tents and having an internet cafe kind of area, that's a great idea. We all know that it's much safer to be outside, and that's a great option. So I think that's wonderful. And then all the other services you mentioned are also good. It's going to be challenging perhaps during the winter, when it's raining and it's cold. I'll remind you though that in terms of indoor, I have staff that are in homeless shelters 8 hours a day with folks, and we have 5 of those, and they're no different than you or I, right? And they're every day with this is what they're there. They don't have N95s, they're there, and also our other staff are working as well in terms of indoors, right? Sometimes our planners spend more than an hour with the applicant and so forth. So it is, there are ways, limit the numbers to small numbers, have appointments, 1 hour at a time, or, and only 10 people at a time. And that's what we're doing with all our other indoor services, right, that we're offering in all of our county departments. But I agree that if we can do it outdoors, that's probably the best option, and see if that works, right? To see if we can offer as much internet. That's probably one of the biggest things where people are missing, right? Access to computers and access to internet. And then what are the options for somebody who wants to check out a book who doesn't have the internet?
So they can call us, and then we'll put it on hold for them, and we can walk through whatever other options we may be able to offer them over the phone, and then they can come to the curbside, one of those 5 locations. And we can also mail items to people too if they can't make it to the curbside, and we've been doing that.
Great, thank you.
Okay. And are there any other board member questions on this item or comments?
I do, Vice Chair Bernal. I want to thank you, Eric, for this comprehensive report. I'd gotten a preview of it talking to Susan a bit last week, but it was very helpful to talk through this. I want to, again, echo a comment I made earlier about pivoting and adapting. And what struck me in reading this is that, we're dealing with a crisis, and in hearing the numbers that you're down, I think in the report, it's cited at 36% down. In terms of the available work hours in your system. And yet we're seeing, with your leadership, the library staff really working to say, how do we change and where do we need to meet people? So with the printing, and I agree with Member Palacios that the internet is so crucial. So it's great that you'll have the Chromebooks. I know that's an experiment and a trial, and there might be opportunities to even get more. Isn't that correct? I know okay, you're nodding yes. Yeah, 200 now, 15 tablets, and see how that works. And I'm also wondering, and this is a bit dangerous to float ideas sometimes, but I'm wondering that if we have the tents in the outdoor space, could we have an opportunity for limited children's book browsing on carts? You get a selection of books, you can wheel them outside. Because I was thinking of the same concern that was raised about, well, if I have access to internet at home, I went online, I reserved my books. But if you don't, and even calling, you may not know what's available. And so there is something nice about browsing. So I don't know if it's safe or logistically really difficult, but that could be a nice added feature of the ability to come on site, print things, obtain your technology, use Wi-Fi safely, and then also maybe do some limited book browsing, especially around children and youth right now. So I don't know, that might be too much. I'm sure you've already thought about it and considered, but that's something that occurred to me. So I'm supportive of this, and however Scotts Valley can help, please let us know. Also, I'm trying to think, thinking of the winter months, are there other creative ways we can leverage other public spaces to flex into something that can be done safely, where people can get out of the elements and yet have a library experience if the opening of libraries is not feasible. So I just want to commend everyone for the continued creativity and innovation, and I know that will continue, and we'll keep talking about this. So thanks very much.
Thank you. I think those are great ideas. We have talked about how we can safely do browsing, and we've talked about how we can safely do browsing outside. I think learning too from the county and from the different jurisdictions, where you're setting up childcare so that we can go beyond our walls and get to you. That's another way that we can continue with the service, which is what we're doing with the school lunches, but it's something that we would like to continue to expand on. Granted, as you mentioned, we're down significantly with staff. And so that's always the biggest restriction that we have.
Yeah, and actually one follow-up question, if I may. There's another library in our county that's operated by the city of Watsonville. Do we know what Watsonville is doing? I'm sure you partner and talk with them. Do you have a sense of what their plans are?
Watsonville has a new interim director. Carol has left us. Actually, Watsonville's been very forward thinking. I think they were the first group to do curbside in the state. And I don't believe that they're letting folks in the building at this time. I'm sorry, I talked to the new director, but we didn't have too detailed of a conversation. Do you know, Eric?
I don't believe that they are.
But Watsonville continues to be a really spectacular library system.
Yeah, Watsonville isn't letting people in the library either. The other thing I thought of is, like, for example, Bookshop Santa Cruz is open, which I thought is ironic, right? People can go in and, you know, they limit the numbers, but you can go browse and look, but you can't come in the library, right? And they have staff there, right? They have protocols, right? Numbers of people, they have mask requirements, they have plexiglass, all of that. But it's another one of those, I know this is very difficult, it's new for everybody, but it's another one of those contradictions, right? Because I can go to the Bookshop Santa Cruz, I can spend an hour there, but I can't go to the library. And I know it's different a little bit, but I also know that anything we can do to expand access for that disenfranchised group that doesn't have access to the internet, which is, we already knew in this county that even if you have money, you don't have good access to a lot of places, right? We just don't have access in many parts of our county to good internet, even if you could afford it. And then so many others just don't have the funds, especially now, given all of the unemployment we're facing and so forth. And then now the schools are closed. So access to books could be great. And I think the outdoor browsing sounds like a great idea, just bringing a cart out and letting people browse outside. I'd also second that as well.
And I just want to say that national associations around libraries are doing a ton of amazing work. We've got a lot of the paperwork out of the Midwest where people are beginning to open up branches, so we see how people are doing it. We actually have a group that's doing testing on COVID on public library books and materials. Interesting though, again, we're faced with these contradictions. So in the past week, it's come down that COVID's lasting longer on print materials than they had originally assumed. So we had been quarantining our books for 3 days. We're going to move it up to 4 days as a result. And that's the kind of thing that for me makes browsing difficult. I think there's a way to do it potentially if you give people gloves in which to browse, and at the end they take the gloves off and throw them away. But there are all of these sort of competing public health messages coming at us. And I agree that there are many contradictions in terms of the business sector. And I'm so glad we have a bookstore in this town that has been so accessible. And we will continue to look at it and make sure that we're consistent with the expectations of this community.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments? No questions? Okay, thank you. Yeah, I just want to really briefly say also that yeah, thank you very much for all the work that you're doing. Certainly a lot there, and it's they're trying times right now, so it's very difficult, and things change very quickly. It's a challenge to try to figure out how to do things best, and we just have to be really creative and flexible constantly, more so than in the past. And the only thing I would add is that one of the things I think was pointed out earlier that I think is also a challenge is just trying to inform the community and make them aware of what's available, which is again difficult because things change as well. So I think I think the jurisdictions can partner with the library to try to do more of that. And then maybe the other opportunity is just being creative about how we can use facilities in partnership as well. Because again, I think access to the programming is one thing, and then facility where you can access the programming is sort of another thing too. So maybe there are partnerships along those lines. Okay, thank you then. We'll then see if there are any members of the public that like to comment on item C.
Vice Chair Bernal, we do have one public comment, and it's surrounding Watsonville. They said, and Watsonville is a COVID hotspot. End the comment.
Okay. All right. If there aren't any more public comments, then Susan, I don't think there's action needs to be taken at this time. Is that right? It's just an update. So with that, we will move on then to the next item, which is the scheduled upcoming meetings. Our next meeting also is October 1st at 6 p.m., another virtual meeting. Then we have adjournment. So with that, I'd like to adjourn the meeting. So thank you very much for your time this morning. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
All right.
everyone.
Take care, everybody.
Yeah, have a great day.